Good evening, class. I'm going to talk about water water meters and the different types of valves. First of all, I'd like to start with the what the code has on valves. It's not that much. Those of you who have a code book or access to it, it's on page 153. Uh, it's section 1014. It's like section. It's like a chapter 14. Okay, the page is 153, right in the middle of the page. And they start with I'm going to mention excessive water pressure. That's the first thing that they have here. And I don't think we talked about this. I know we talked about it with tier two. Excessive water pressure is when you have water pressure. This is only in the state of Massachusetts. I don't know about other states, but here it's if you have water pressure that's in excess of 80 pounds pressure in Massachusetts, you have to deal with it. Okay. It is actually a good idea. Some of our code rules are a little overkill. This one is not. At 80 pounds pressure, you have actually, even at 80, it's a little too much. It wears out the valves, and any moving parts that are in contact wear out faster when you have high pressure like this. Ball cocks, shut-off valves, anything like that. So what you have to do is to install a pressure reducer. So if you got a situation where the pressure is higher than 80, use a pressure reducer. This would be at the meter, right? Obviously, so the whole house would be protected. Now, this would be like possibly even before the meter. It depends on the town. They might have their own rules and regulations. I remember in Portsmouth many years ago, they would give you a diagram exactly how they wanted you to install uh, the pressure reducer, the meter, and the shutoffs. And they gave you a thing called a spacer. It was about a foot long, and it represented the length of a meter end to end with those meter nipples. I think they call them on either end of the meter. Now, remember, technically that is not plumbing, but when we do the water, if we hook up the water service, this was part of it. And we'd put that piece of pipe in, and when they made their inspection, they would check out that we did it according to their sketch with the pressure reducer, the spacer, and the shutoffs. And if they liked it, excuse me, I forgot to shut my phone off. That's what I need is spam risk. Okay, um, so what they would do is to come and check it out, and if they liked it, they would install the meter. If they didn't, to tell you what to correct and leave. So the pressure reducer in Portsmouth is very important. I did see the bottom blow off a meter when I was an apprentice. There was some water. I think it was everybody was still working at the house, and I can't recall if there was a pressure reducer hooked up or not. I don't think so. I don't think it had been installed yet, but there was a meter there. Now this was back in my apprentice days, probably the early 70s, and it blew the bottom right off the meter. So just picture a water meter. There's a plate on the bottom, and I believe it's for freezing. It will blow off, and it did because somebody shut the valve off fast. Like a ball valve is a fast-acting valve. It doesn't close slowly like a gate valve. It just quarter turn, it's on or it's off, and it was enough to blow the bottom off. And the pressure was probably at least 100 pounds. This is right down near the water because those water tanks up on Quaker Hill, they're very high. In any case, uh, the pressure reducer is what you need when the pressure is 80 pounds or higher. Okay, now if you're working in a house where the pressure is anywhere around 80 pounds, uh, and you shut the water off fast, although nobody has installed a pressure reducer, if you turn the water off fast, it'll stop. You'll sometimes hear the pipes banging and moving around. Actually, you can hear the pipes banging because there's just so much pressure that when the water stops flowing, it jars the pipe and will actually move it. A good idea to put a pressure reducer in. Now the pressure reducer, I'm going to put here set to 55 psi. Now that's not code. That's my idea. 55 is a good pressure. Anybody here who's worked on a well pump knows that a well pump is typically set somewhere between 40 and 60 pounds. That's the range it works in. That's for another night. And 50-ish, 50, 55 that's a good working pressure. Give you plenty of water for a shower or whatever else you're doing without being too much. 80 pounds, especially with an old-fashioned shower, that'll all but push you to the other side of the shower. Okay, pressure reducer, 55, put it near the meter. All right, moving on. The next one I have here is return circulation. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this. Return circulation is when your water heater is too far from where you want it to provide water to. Okay, this would be a big house, like a big, long, fancy house, maybe like a big ranch house. I've done a couple that were close to 100 feet long, so this could happen. Water comes in here, right? And it goes out the other side of the water heater, way over here, and it goes up. And that's a symbol used for like for water pipe, where the sink is or wherever it's going to. So we'll say that it's going over to here to the sink, right? The hot water side of the sink. Now, what happens if this is over 100 feet long? Right, over 100 feet. By law, you have to put a recirculating line. Again, this is actually a very good idea. In fact, I wouldn't even go with this. What this means is if you're 100 feet away from the water heater, you have to empty out 100 feet plus of piping. That means you're going to stand there at the sink and wait a couple of minutes. It's kind of annoying for the water to get to the faucet. So, what the code says is you have to put in a recirculating line. It's actually pretty clever. So you get close to the sink, and under the floor, you would run a T like this, and run another line back over here and down. And coming off the heater, you take the boiler drain off, and put a T in there, right? Hook it up like that. And of course, you're going to have to put something in to make it circulate. So we'll put in a circulator, right? For those of you who haven't seen it, this won't be a regular circulator like you use, like a 007. Might be a 005. I forgot the number on it, but it would have to be stainless or bronze. Taco, I believe, is a bronze circulator, but stainless would be okay. It can't be a ferrous metal like cast or steel like a 007 because of the fresh water. So you put a circulator on here, and the way it works is it could be on a timer, or it could just work all the time. These pumps don't use much electricity. They're very quiet, and wouldn't even notice it. So the water would go down here and come around like this and back into the heater. So what it means is when you get up in the morning, the water right here would be at 130, which is the maximum, right? So you'd only be drawing water this far, whatever it is, say 10, 15 feet, which is nothing. Okay, that's a recirculation line. I have seen it once without the circulator. It's supposed to go by gravity. I wouldn't count on that. I've never done a job without one, nor have I, as an inspector, have I seen one that didn't have a circulator. That's the way to go. So remember, legally you have to do it if it's over 100 feet from the heater to the fixture. If it's anywhere near that, I'd say anything over maybe 50 or 60 feet, you might want to talk about it with the owner, right? Even though you don't have to do it, it's a good idea, right? That is called a recirculation line. They call it return circulation here. Okay, now let's get into the valves themselves. Okay, so what kind of valve are we going to use here? Well, it depends. Let's come back into the basement. Foundation wall is over here. Cellar floor is right here. And going to come in through the wall. You're going to have a shut off. Your meter. Put another shut off. And away we go. Something like that. Now, if you did have a pressure reducer, because the water pressure here was over 80, it would go on the left side of the meter to protect the meter, right? Plus it would protect everything else in the house. What kind of valves can I use here? The code is very specific, right? On page 153, they spell it out. They call it a meter valve, right? For the water meter. One would be a gate valve. All right, you've all probably heard of it. I call it an old-fashioned valve. I think the gate valves were still being used when I was a kid, but by the 70s, for sure, we were using ball valves. A gate valve, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to draw a big picture of it, but just picture it's got a disc on the end of it with a shaft like this, and the handle's up here. This here, the disc goes up and goes down. They say it looks like a gate the way it goes straight up and straight down. It works very well. It's very effective. The problem is that when it gets old, this will rot off to the point where if it doesn't rot off completely, when you turn the handle, this valve won't come up. It will close. You definitely can get it to close, but when you try to reopen it, you're going to find that it might not come up. So if you're working at a water meter and it's got two gate valves on it, this picture in the book is far better than what I could draw, so I'm not going to attempt to draw the valve. You can shut it off, but it's going to be very hard. There's a chance that it might stay down like this. Now, if it stays down, what are you going to do? If it's this one in particular, and you don't have one on this side, or if you just got one over here, you're going to have the city shut the water off. There was a time when they used to let us use a thing called a street key. It looks like a T about maybe 3 feet tall with maybe 16 inches, 14 inches across, and you turn it like a quarter turn to turn the valve on out here at the street, in the street. There'd be a little cap on the sidewalk. If you haven't dealt with it, maybe when you're a kid, if you lived in a city, you see a little cap, and I believe it said water on there. And they changed it to a 5-sided nut so nobody could open it anymore. So you're probably going to be stuck. So I'm getting at is you don't want to break one of these. So when you shut one of these off with a gate valve, you can recognize it. It's a very tall valve. It doesn't look like any other one. Shut it off very gently. Do not muscle it down. Even crack it open to let it drain on the floor in a bucket or whatever, so you don't have to tighten it too much, right? So do it very gently and do whatever it is you have to do, whatever repair or whatever reason you need the water shut off, and then very gently open it. You still might break it off, but there's a better chance if you don't muscle it down. It looks pretty rugged, it's probably 3/4 or maybe 1 inch, probably 3/4 inch brass valve right here. It could be 1/2 inch. But they just give out. They don't last. Okay, now the other valve that you can use is called a ball valve. right, you're all familiar with. I'm sure you're all familiar with ball valve. Now that is a relatively new valve. I kind of remember when that wasn't around. When I was a kid, like again, when I was a kid, a long time ago, obviously, we had gate valves, we had globe valves, but we didn't have. I don't remember ball valves. They were a big thing when they came out. The only problem with the ball valve is you got to be careful. You probably already been told that if you're sweating one, if you're soldering one on, that you don't get too much heat on the valve itself in the middle of the valve because it's got I think it's a Teflon seat. So what I try to do is to put a wet rag on the side opposite from where I'm working and drape it over the middle of the valve, solder it up and as quickly as I can, cool it all off and go do the other side. I've never melted one, but I heard it can happen. Anyway, both of these are legal for water service because they're full flow. Remember the word. They both have to be full flow valves, right? They can't be restrictive like some valves, globe valve, for example. So these are the two that you're going to see on all water services. Even the ancient ones will have a gate valve on them. Okay, the newer ones, anything from probably the 70s forward, will have a ball valve. Okay, I haven't really taken a close look at the time. I'm going to just do a few more things, and I'm going to switch over and do another segment. So let's see. We got riser valves. Oh, good place. They call it a riser valve. I'm going to get rid of this here. Okay, not a name that we use that often. It's a valve that's installed at the base of each water supply riser. Okay, so if you got a bathroom upstairs, you got fixtures, whatever, you can use any valve. Okay, they call it a valve that's installed at the base of each water supply riser. And this would not be in a single family home. This would be in a multi-family home. So if you got somebody living on an upper level, it's called a riser valve that would go up to that particular apartment. And then they get into the design of it. You can't shut the water off for one if it affects the other one, obviously. When you get into a situation where you have a big building, normally the bigger, the more expensive the job, the more detailed the plans, and the less that you have to freelance, figure it out for yourself. Okay, let's switch over, and I will see you back in just a minute.